Hey, welcome to this video. Today we're going to talk about the basics of object-oriented programming. In general, this video could be for anyone. I am going to discuss it in terms of PHP, but really there's nothing PHP specific here. My name is Brendan. I'm not sure if I said that already. If you like this video series or this video, or you hate it, I guess, if you're a terrible person, you can like the video, you can leave a comment on what you thought, and you can subscribe to this channel, which is super important for small creators like myself. So getting to the basics of object-oriented programming, I'm going to assume that you know very little about this since you're watching this video, and we're just going to go through the basics, and I'll give you some examples of where object-oriented programming could work. So in object-oriented programming, you create classes. A class is a collection of functions and properties that are grouped together because they're related. When you do this, it provides the ability to do encapsulation, which is grouping related functions and properties together. If you want to know more about encapsulation, I've probably recorded a video on it, and it's probably in this series, and you can just go and watch that. You can control access to the properties and the functions on your class by setting their visibility. You could have a public method or a function, which is accessible from outside of the class. You could have a protected method or function, same thing, that is accessible to children of that class as well as the class itself. And you could have a private method or function, same thing. That is accessible only to that class. The same goes for properties. Properties are like variables that are specific to that class, and they can be public, private, protected as well, at least in PHP. That terminology depends on the specific language that you're using, but you can control access to the methods and properties. You can have what's called inheritance. So the whole core of object-oriented programming is code reuse. And you can have children. You can create a class, and you can have a child of that class, which inherits everything from the parent class. And then you can have a child of the child, and a child of the child of the child. And that makes up your inheritance structure. You can have you can overwrite your if you have a child class, you can overwrite the functions that the parent provides or the properties that the parent provides, or set them to different values if it's a property, and you can expand on them if you want. So every class has a constructor method, which is called when the class is instantiated. So a class is just it's a representation of an object. And when you create an instance of that class, you are instantiating it. And with object-oriented programming, you can create multiple instances of a class. So you could have, and because they're all encapsulated, there are 3 different versions. So say you had a class called widget, and you had 3 different widgets. You could have 3 different widget classes, or 3 different widget objects that are all using the same class to define their initial properties and functions. So let's give an example of where inheritance can be useful. Imagine you have a dog, and you want to represent things about this dog. A dog can bark, and a dog has a name, and a dog has an age. A dog can be walked, and it can have a property on it that defines the last time it was walked. Because if you don't walk it, it's going to pee on your floor or bark a lot. You can have a cat, and a cat can meow, and a cat has a name, and a cat has an age, and a cat can puke on your sneakers, which my cat did very recently. And it wasn't even on the outside of the sneaker, it was like right in the sneaker. Those sneakers are dead to me now, and that's sad. So you also have a property that tracks the last time the cat puked on a pair of shoes. So those are 2 different classes, and they define various functions and properties. So a dog has a bark function, and it has a property that is defining the sound of the bark, or maybe the volume. the dog has a property that defines its age, and maybe getters and setters that allow you to get the age and set the age. So getters and setters, it's a common term. It's like a function that allows you, that basically returns the value of a property on a class, or sets the value of a property on a class, as opposed to accessing it directly and setting it directly from outside the class, which is not typically done. The cat, again, has like a meow function. It has a property that defines the sound it makes, so the meow sound. It has a property that defines its age, and it has a property that getters and setters for the age. It has a puke function that will puke on your shoes, and it has a property that defines the last time it puked on the shoes. Now, when you think about this, if you were to code these two classes, there'd be a lot of similar code between them. They share a lot of things. Both of them have names. Both of them make sounds. A dog barks and a cat meows, but in essence, they're doing the same thing. They're making a sound. So with inheritance, you would potentially take those things that are the same and move them out of those classes and up to a shared parent class. So you define a pet class, perhaps an abstract pet class. We're not going to talk about abstract classes too much, but basically they're classes that don't get instantiated into objects. They're basically there to be used in your inheritance hierarchy. So that's not the whole reason, but for your intents and purposes, that's what that is. So a pet can make a sound, and a pet has a property that defines the sound that's made. It also has an age, and it has getters and setters that allow you to get their age and set their age. These can have different visibility, so public or protected or private. So you might not want the sound that a pet makes to be changed from outside of the class itself. So from some code that's running and is instantiating your classes into objects, you might not want that code to be able to set the sound directly. So you would set that to a private property, which means that you'd have to use the getter, you'd have to use the setter to set the property, and a getter to get the value from the property. But the make sound function is probably public because you want that to be called from outside of your class. You want the code that is instantiating your classes into objects to be able to do something. So you have a cat class that can make a sound, and you can call that from your code. So a dog can be a child of a pet, and it will inherit the ability to make a sound. And the sound property can be overwritten in the dog class declaration from some maybe an empty value of nothing, because pet in and of itself doesn't make a sound, or it just doesn't know what sound it makes. So you could set the sound property to woof, and you can use the set age and get age functions after instantiating the dog class into a dog object to set the dog's age. And then you could call make sound to have it woof. A cat, excuse me, a cat similarly would be a child of pet. It would inherit the ability to make sounds. You would set the sound property to, or you would overwrite the parent sound property with meow. It can use the set age and get age functions to set and get the age. And it has a public puke function, which can be called from outside of the class itself, or the object itself. And it has its own probably private or protected last puked property, which tracks the last time it was puked. And now the cat and dog classes only contain information or functions and properties that are specific to cats and dogs, and anything that's more generalized has been moved up to the pet class. Now say you wanted to get more specific. You could have a child of the dog class that was a specific breed, a Rottweiler. And the Rottweiler might make a different sound than the generic dog. The Rottweiler might have a different amount of food that is required. A cat that has a cat might have, say, a last brushed or a brush function. But if you got a hairless cat, you wouldn't necessarily need to brush it. So you could have a child of the cat class that was hairless, and you could have a child that was haired, not unhairless, something like that. And your hierarchy gets a little bit more specific. Now you have to be careful with inheritance because it's really easy to get really crazy and to abstract things, continue to abstract things up and up and up until you've got this intense, 15 classes down all the way down to the side to get to your instantiation of a specific object. And that is one of the critiques of object-oriented programming, is that inheritance doesn't always allow you to mix and match the functionality that you want. Now in PHP, you have something called traits, which allow you to basically, you write a trait and it can be applied to a class, and it can be applied to multiple classes regardless of your inheritance structure. So that's a way around that, where you can sort of mix and match traits and inheritance to get the behavior that you're looking for. So hopefully this answered some of your questions about object-oriented programming, what it is, and what inheritance is. There'll probably be videos specifically talking about inheritance and encapsulation, so look for them. If you liked it, leave a comment, a like, subscribe to the channel so that we can, so you can get more videos of this kind. And thank you very much. See ya.